Greetings, ladies and gentlefish, and welcome back to some more subscriber replays. And, well, so I've got some more Tank Destroyer replays for you this week. But I put out Tank Destroyer replays last week. So let's break it up a little bit, shall we? Let's go to some Chinese medium tanks. And we join Alpha Niner in his Tier 7 Chinese medium tank. This is, of course, the T-34-1. A tank that certainly used to be pretty good. If memory serves, back when I played it, I enjoyed this thing, and I don't think it's really changed that much. And I don't really expect... It's one of those tanks that I don't think... Oh, boop on the Sherman there. I don't think it's going to be that affected by changes in the game. It still hits pretty hard for a Tier 7 medium tank, with 250 alpha damage on this 100mm gun. The gun still takes forever to aim, of course. Your hull armour is still not reliable, but your turret armour can still get some bounces. It's small, it's low profile, it's reasonably mobile. Yeah, anyway, I'll stop going on about the tank. It's definitely a bit of a highlight before you get to the T-34-2. Probably the less said about that one, the better. Anyway, we're here on Malinovka. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Well, let's see how this pans out. Now, interestingly, Alpha's loading a HE round here. Presumably he's expecting to shoot some lightly armoured targets, a bit like that Barask. And if you can, you can get some tasty damage. 330 alpha damage with 50 pen on these 100mm HE rounds, which, again, remember, it's only a Tier 7. This is a tier where you're going to see Hellcats, Super Hellcats, Barasks. I mean, Tier 6 light tanks are all pretty universally poorly armoured. Well, light tanks in general are, but you get my point, I hope. So it's not a terrible idea there, and actually was rewarded, and I must say, I do notice that loading a HE round as maybe your first round in the game by default can pay dividends if you're expecting to meet lightly armoured tanks like light tanks, especially if you've got a fairly meaty gun like this. So I really like that ammunition choice there. And even if your HE doesn't actually penetrate, you still manage to do some damage, and you've got a decent chance of blowing people's tracks off and whatnot. So I think, obviously situational, but I think it can be quite a nice round. And oh, there are few things in this game that give me greater satisfaction than watching a wheeled French light tank trundle along at some stupid speed, not really trundling then I guess, and get slammed in the side with a penetrating HE round fired from like 400-500 meters away from a Chinese tank. Oh, that's just a thing of beauty if you ask me. So another lovely shot there, 347 damage into that EBR, who subsequently goes on to have a rather bad day. And we're just whittling these guys down here. Now, one thing that Alpha pointed out when he submitted this replay is there's a particular T-78 on his team who you might want to pay some attention to. Well, that guy died. Now, there's two T-78s. I'm not going to spoil the surprise, but if you just keep half an eye on chat here or there, especially when one of them dies, you might notice a delightful individual who, you know, well, you'll see. You'll see. Now, switching back to AP rounds here, and I think that is the right choice to try and get some damage in on, for example, the side of that Lerva. Oh, he's gone unspotted, but Alpha taking a punt there, but clearly no joy. Side of the turret on a T-29, and the hull as well. There we go, 265 is a slightly high damage roll, but not by too much again. This gun has 250 alpha, which is quite nice for a Tier 7 medium tank. That one just blows his tracks off, unfortunately. Not the most accurate gun in the world, though, it must be said. Shots on the Lerva. Ooh, big fat side armour, and not fully aimed, and the shot goes wide. That's a shame. And actually loading HE again here, which slightly surprises me, given the shots that Alpha's got on the sides of some of these tanks. I do think that's probably a bit of a mistake. I mean, don't get me wrong, I know you can definitely track some of these tanks, but I mean, it doesn't matter when you can't hit them. The accuracy on this gun is not very good, but I do think it's a bit of a mistake there to not have the possibility to penetrate the side of a Lerva for 250 damage. But again, like, if your shots are going to keep going low, it doesn't matter. And Alpha's actually loading an APCR round here. Again, I was about to say it doesn't make a difference. You don't need the penetration against the side of a Lerva, but at least that round actually hit, I suppose. Go figure. Longer range APCR can be a viable choice because of the faster shell velocity. If you compare them, for example, here AP you get 895, APCR in this case goes up to 1119. But in general, shots like that you don't need APCR to achieve what you want. But you know, it hit, it penned. We'll take it. Game slowed down. Scoreline is 5-2, as games often do on Malinovka, let's be honest. Slow is kind of the name of the the map, or might as well be. Friendly team has now lost a couple of tanks, including a T-78, but not the T-78 in question. So we'll just wait a moment for his platoon mate to have something to say here. I think it's his platoon mate anyway. And they've also lost a Patriot by the look of it. Friendly team have sort of claimed the hill. The Tiger and the 45 TP are on the hill, but last spotted there are a couple of enemy tanks who are also on the hill, so not sure they've won the hill per se, but we'll see how that pans out. Rheinmetall Borsig has cropped up. That's a very dangerous tank, especially on a map like this, and he's very low health, and he's very, very dead as a Scorpion picks up the kill and Alpha gets a little bit of assistance. So that Lerva's made it to the top of the hill, which is going to be a problem. That's a higher tier than either a Tiger or a 45 TP, and packing 10 degrees of gun depression and decent turret front and a fairly punchy gun, that could become a problem. And oh, there's a G-Saw in the background who just deletes that Tiger 1, and suddenly the 45 TP is wondering what he did to deserve this outcome. Now, we're going to get a bit of a problem here, because I think it's fairly obvious to anyone who's capable of looking at a mini-map that the hill is going to be lost. 45 TP. Oh, Allied T-34-100 has drowned himself, by the way. Just wanted to point that out. It's obvious that the 45 TP isn't going to be able to stand up to a Lerva, and he's getting pummeled by artillery, and he's just having a really bad day. So the question then becomes, what are you going to do about it? There's no point complaining about it, you just need to do something about it. Now, if either team has won the hill, that doesn't change the fact that they still have to do something with that. Don't get me wrong, the hill can be valuable, but it's not as if winning the hill on any map automatically hands the game to you. It just gives you a position, a resource to use. The question becomes, what do you do with that position and that resource? Well, if people are going to be coming down from the hill, one thing you could definitely do about it is spot them. And until Alpha moved up to this position, the friendly team didn't really have anyone in a position to do it. So Alpha spots the Lerva, and he pulls back so that the bushes are opaque here. And what that means is that when Alpha fires the gun, the camouflage penalty from bushes and trees that would normally be reduced by firing the gun is not reduced by firing the gun. I guess essentially the logic is that you've pulled back, like normally if you were to shoot from a bush or something, you'd have a muzzle flash, for instance. If you've pulled back far enough that your muzzle flash is not going to be visible to anyone, then congratulations, you aren't going to be spotted when firing the gun. Well, I say you aren't going to be spotted, that isn't strictly true. It's just that the tree or bush or whatever, you don't get the camouflage penalty to that camo from firing the gun. You still get worse camouflage for your actual tank from firing the gun though, so you can still get spotted, but the point I'm trying to make is that it was an intelligent use of camo mechanics there from Alpha, so I just wanted to highlight it. The friendly team, by the way, is sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Dying, which is not optimal. Just lost the AMX-12T, that's the team's last light tank down, which on a map like this is a worrisome loss. That Lerva, though, is now on 142 health, and yeah, he's going to have a bad day. But there's a Hell Kitty over there as well, who is also going to have a bad day. Alpha puts one shot into him, and Scorpion just deletes him. Now, Alpha's is firing APCR here. I'm looking at the enemy team. There's not really anything on the enemy team you need APCR for. You could argue when he originally loaded the round it was for the front of the Lerva. Potentially you could need it for that, but it's not really going to do a huge amount against any of the other targets that are available. Alpha unfortunately takes a shot there from the cheeky G-Saw. That's a very dangerous auto-loading tank destroyer, but manages to make it only the one shot from that G-Saw and bugs out. So, A43, well, he's a one-shot, but can definitely still do some spotting. That's a pretty mobile medium tank there. We know the G-Saw 1008 is around there. Might be taking the opportunity to reload, probably not. I believe that tank gets a 4-round magazine, so if he's fired one of his rounds, they do 320 average damage. He's probably packing about 900 mag damage left. And, oh no, it was the first T78 in chat who's now getting very, very salty. Apparently, Alpha here is doing wrong things. Okay. I think you could argue maybe Alpha spent a little bit too long in his initial position, but this is Malinovka. It tends to be quite a slow-paced map, and Alpha has made some intelligent use of bush mechanics and camouflage mechanics in general to try and not get spotted and shot up. Apparently, Alpha is a stat padding pussy. You know, you get those times when someone in chat, usually after they're dead, decides they don't like what you're doing and they're going to start making their displeasure felt and known. And apparently, the T78 played the game rather than running away. Yes. Which is presumably why the aforementioned tank destroyer is currently dead. And Alpha is not. And still sitting on almost 1800 damage and almost 1000 assistance. Anyway. Let's just not pay any more attention to that T78. The only last thing I will say about it is, if perchance, and I'm not suggesting you do, you've probably got far better things to do with your time, but if perchance you should ever decide to look up the statistics of that player out of a sense of morbid curiosity, you will discover that that T78, and I know this will shock and surprise all of you, is not actually very good at the game. It doesn't win very much, doesn't do a lot of damage, just doesn't do a great deal of anything. In fact, he's not good enough at the game to the extent that he's kind of in that category where you could be forgiven for not being able to distinguish them from a bot. Granted, this would be quite a good bot in the grand scheme of things, but it's still a bot. So, sorry, Alpha's playing a map that is quite slow and methodical in a slow and methodical manner, and he's gradually grinding the enemy down, providing vision for his team, and getting their tanks shot up. So, I guess the moral of this story is when someone calls you a stat padder, just take it as the compliment it is and move on. Anyway, this G-Saw has decided he's trying to push this game, which I can understand. Unfortunately, he got spotted, and a spotted G-Saw does rather tend to move to the top of everybody's "it must die" priority list, because that's a very dangerous machine, and indeed he gets deleted by the Progetto in the end. And that's some more damage, and some more assistance damage there for Alpha as he continues on his quest to give vision to his team. Ooh, hello Mr. T29. And allow them to deal with the bad guys. Now, this is a slightly awkward position. It would be really nice if artillery could take this guy down. Unfortunately, given the M44's position, that hill that you can just see there is going to make that rather awkward. And unfortunately, the T-34-1 only gets about 5 degrees of gun depression off the top of my head, maybe 6, but it's not enough to pop over this ridge line and shoot the guy without taking a hit in return. As it is, Alpha gets a little bit lucky there. And the T-29 shot just goes, well, it just bounces actually. Where did that bounce? No idea. Anyway, and Alpha's able to kill him, and this is the Su-122-44 who's been spotted, and it's just this Soviet tank destroyer who's got his bum to Alpha now. There we go, right up the what's it. And and the M44 somewhere. And Alpha's going for it, and this is where one of those HE rounds that Alpha fired earlier on might be useful, because 50 pen should be enough to deal with an M44, and that would put him in one-shot territory, reliable one-shot territory, as opposed to not. I mean, a friendly tank is probably going to land a shot on this guy anyway, and as it stands, Alpha's able to pick up the kill, and there we go. That is the game. Another long one, because, well, Kampanovka things. But I thought, all things considered, you know, not top tier and all that jazz, I thought that was a patiently played game that ended up reaping rewards there for Alpha Niner. Nicely done. Let's have a look at the post-game stats. So, there we go. That game ended up being enough for Ace, Tanker, Spotter, Bruiser, Duelist, 5 for Effect, and a Confederate medal, which is a medal I always kind of like seeing. Usually indicating that whilst, you know, you didn't go around and mop up all of the bazillion kills, but usually you had a pretty well-rounded, competently played game that not only meant you did well yourself, but you also enabled your team to do well. So, always nice to see that medal. 2,448 damage there, 3 kills, 1,309 base experience. Shout out should go to the friendly artillery. 2,601 damage, 2 kills, and over 1,000 XP from him is pretty nice going. And interesting that despite the fact that the Patriot died relatively early on, at that point, he'd done enough to come third on his team. So, there's that. And if anyone's curious, the Gobby T-78 managed 2 penetrating shots by the look of it. Oh, okay, sorry. So this apparently, just briefly, this is what counts as playing the game. You fire 13 shots, you hit 4 of them, you penetrate 2 of them, you do 450 damage, you get a little bit of assistance, and then you die. That's what playing the game is. It's not, clearly, 2,500 damage, 1,600 assistance, 3 kills, 1,300 base XP on top of your team. So just as long as we're clear on that, okay? Just want to make sure everybody understands. Shout out also to the enemy artillery there. Another M44, almost 2,000 damage from him. Well played to him in a tier 8 game, but just not enough. 24 shots fired, 13 hits, 11 penetrations for that damage count. Most of that damage was actually from closer range than you might think, given the map. 5 hits received, 2 pen, 3 didn't, 710 damage blocked by Alpha's armour there, 1 enemy vehicle spotted, 9 damage, 3 destroyed, 1,600 assistance damage, well, 1,604 if you want to be pedantic, 3.51 kilometres travelled. Alpha did make a loss on that game, because he did end up firing all of his APCR rounds. Unnecessarily, I would say. I can understand loading them in case you have to deal with the Lerva frontally, but after that point, I think, and before that point, I think quite a few of those rounds were fired without the need, so that could have been a greater profit. But that's not a criticism per se. They're Alpha's credits, it's up to him what he does with them. It's just worth noting that he didn't have to spend 47,500 credits on ammunition to get a win out of that game. But a nice game overall, and just sort of a pretty well-rounded game, I thought. Now, I've got another one to show you today, which is going to be a little bit different. Game number 2 then, and for this one we join some grass in the relatively new Chinese Tier 8 Premium Medium Tank, the 122TM. Now this is not going to be a 15-minute match, it's going to be about half that. And we're here on Sand River, and the 122TM I find quite an interesting machine. Because it's, in many ways, decidedly un-Chinese, certainly in terms of gameplay, anyway. When you think of the Chinese tech tree, generally speaking, you think of big derpy guns, which hit hard with every shot, but somewhat with a dubious reload. Not very accurate. Poor gun depression and all that jazz. 122TM gets 8 degrees of gun depression, which is not the best, but certainly couldn't be classified as poor. And gets a pretty reliable 120mm gun. This thing does 400 alpha damage, I tell a lie, and has about 230 base pen, 233 there, and almost 1400 meters a second shell velocity, which for a tier 8 medium tank, that's pretty reliable. Premium rounds, penetration goes up to basically 300, but they're slower, so bit of a trade-off. So, being here on Sand River, a map that really likes tanks to have gun depression, would pose a problem for many Chinese tanks, but not so much the 122 TM. The two downsides of the tank, I suppose, are one, it's not particularly fast, and two, the DPM could best be described as abysmal. It is atrocious, it is awful, it is terrible, it sucks. You have a long reload on this gun. So you don't want to go in and really fully commit onto an engagement, because generally speaking your opponents will have the DPM to burn you down, although you do have some armour to work with, to be fair. Instead, this is a kind of consistent tank that rewards people who are methodical and just like to gradually grind their opponents into the dust, I suppose. Like, you can see the gun's still reloading. And this will be some grass, so it's probably got pretty good crew skills. He loves his Chinese medium tanks. And so I'm imagining this is a very good crew, and pretty swanky equipment and whatnot, I should imagine. I mean, you can see there he's running a food consumable. So this is about as good as the gun performance on this thing is going to get. But it's pretty consistent, he says, as the thing bounces off the front of a tier 6. Oh, it's just the commentator's curse. You say something, and as soon as you say that, something in-game will happen in a vain hope that is going to prove you wrong. Well, screw you. The exception proves the rule, as we all know. Hello, Mr. P43. You having a good day? I hope you're having a good day. That looked like it hurt. So, this is... yeah, well, we'll just let the game speak for itself. I'm not going to give you spoilers as to what it's like. So that tier 6 is down. That's another T78. We had a couple of those in the last game, and the usually reliable gun there does not hit the mark. Now, to be fair, Sumgrass pulled back there. I think he was worried about overexposing himself, which is never something you want to do. People tend to have views on such things. And so I completely understand pulling back there. But he lets the gun aim at the front of the KV-85's turret there, and blam, he becomes kill number 1. The friendly team is actually 2-0 up in kills. Nice bounce there off the turret of this machine. Hello, Tiger. How are you today? You doing well? Yeah, 390 alpha to the face. So Sumgrass is just gradually advancing the engagement here. And he's not trying to give opponents particularly easy shots on him, but as long as he doesn't give them stupidly easy shots, and especially if he's hull down, it's actually a real challenge for the enemy to penetrate him. This thing has a very good turret front, and actually a pretty well-armoured frontal plate as well. T25 pilot there manages to pen a shot, and Sumgrass just puts one into the front of his turret in return. But so far Sumgrass has taken one penetrating shot from a 90mm gun that actually rolled bang on average 240, but in exchange he's got 1800 assistance and 2,500 of his own damage. Yeah, oh, and there goes the T78 from earlier on. So that's pretty good trading, whichever way you look at this. Oh, that pilot. Oh, artillery decided to have its wicked way with you. Now, with the KV, or both KVs down there dead, Sumgrass takes this opportunity to move forward. There's a Barask over here on his side, but as long as he uses his gun depression and turret armour, ooh, yeah, able to squeeze a shot in there. The Barask can't really do anything to Sumgrass here. This is not an engagement. The Barask wins, and the Barask quite understandably decides, yeah, maybe not. Let's do our best Dr. Zoidberg impression, and clears off, which is entirely understandable, and arguably he should have done that sooner if we're actually going to be honest. Because on this sort of map, Sumgrass can just use his gun depression on these ridgelines, go hull down, and grind the enemy into the dust. How do you deal with this tank? Well, you don't allow it to do this. This right here is what this tank does. You want to put 2 shots in every time this guy puts 1 shot into your head. Maybe even 3 or 4 shots, depending... Oh, that was a bad shot. An uncharacteristically bad shot. Depending on the tank you're playing, because the reload on this thing is so bad, you want to Swarmer Sucker him with multiple allies, you know, all that good stuff. You just don't want to allow him to dictate the pace of the engagement, because then the pace will be pop, bang, and then 15 to 20 seconds later, pop, bang, rinse, and repeat. And when You try and shoot him. If he's playing well, you'll be faced with a difficult shot on the front of the guy's turret. There goes the Tiger, there goes the Barask, and despite the fact that this gun has super duper low DPM, they've just ground through that flank, and Sumgrass has picked up almost 5,000 damage in the space of, what, 6 or so minutes? I mean, low DPM, obviously it's not great, but good alpha damage, which you've got here, can definitely compensate for it. I mean, Sumgrass started this game with 20 rounds of APCR, which is the standard ammunition on this gun. He now has 1. So he's managed to fire 19 shots. The matchmaking was good, don't get me wrong. But that low DPM doesn't seem to be holding Sumgrass back too much here. Now, obviously this is just one game. I'm sure there are going to be those games where the low DPM really kicks you in the nadgers and you just can't do the damage fast enough to keep your team in it. But, well, this game is not one of those. Oh, that doesn't hit the Charioteer there. Charioteer moves forward and, like, with the best will in the world, what's this guy going to do? Sumgrass is just going to come up here and really make him regret his life choices. There we go. I mean, you could argue here that maybe Sumgrass should load a HE round. The turret front on that thing is pretty poor. What's Sumgrass's HE rounds like? He carries 1. It is 515 and 62 pen. Sumgrass doesn't. He's onto firing his heat ammunition, though, because he's run out of regular AP. Ran this guy to death. Oh, IKV picks up the kill. Spoil sport. Right, Sumgrass, come on. You have to kill the artillery. Good boy. There we go. And that just leaves a Caro P88 on the enemy team. And we know where he is. He's on the other side of the map. I think it highly unlikely Sumgrass is going to get there before anyone else. Yeah, the friendly Caro picks him up, and that was the game. That's it. It's over. The enemy team are all dead. Let's have a look at the post-game stats. So, them some big numbers. Why do you do this to me, Sumgrass? It's not fair. You always send in replays and I'm like, okay, those numbers are big, I feel rubbish. Anyway. Ace Tanker, Spotter, Bruiser, Shellproof, Fighter, Fire for Effect, and High Caliber. 5 kills, not quite enough for a top gun there, which I guess is a little bit of a shame, but let's not complain too much about it. 6,167 damage, 5 kills, 1,941 base experience. That's not with any missions or daily doubles or any of that other nonsense, and that's especially impressive when you consider that Sumgrass was top tier, meaning that some of his shots went into lower tier tanks. There were no tier 10s to shoot at to get a positive XP multiplier, no. Like the P43, the Tiger, the KV85, the M44, the Super Chaffee, the KV3, the T78, most of the tanks that Sumgrass shot are going to give him an XP multiplier less than 1 because they're lower tier. And he's still got over 1,900 base XP. let's just properly order these guys by experience, sorry. Second place was the Hummel with less than half that. I mean, that was a bit of a carry. It wasn't, oh my god, I'm outnumbered 10 to 1 at the end. It was just a consistent grinding down of the enemy team, and they all died. What more can you say? 23 shots fired, which for a gun with that long a reload is quite a lot. 19 hits, 17 pens for that damage count, most of which was from relatively close range. 9 hits received, 1 penetrated, 7 didn't, 1 bit of splash damage there, 1,500 damage blocked by his armour, 8 enemy vehicles spotted, 10 damaged, 5 destroyed, 2,133 assistance damage, and 2.42 kilometres travelled. Okay, there were personal reserves at the time, blah 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 blah, but even taking away the auto resupply of consumables, which was presumably that food consumable, and even taken away the almost 36,000 credits spent on ammunition because Sumgrass fired some heat rounds because he ran out of regular APCR on that tank, he still made a 224,500 credit profit. It's quite impressive, and that's a lot of XP. I'm not going to bother going through that. It's just lots of XP, lots, and there's no ×2 for the first win of the day or any of that other nonsense. It's just lots of XP, like lots. Anyway, there you go. A couple of replays for you there in maybe some tanks you don't see as much, because the Chinese tech tree, let's be honest, isn't the most popular tech tree out there. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, by all means feel free to catch some of my other videos and or subscribe to my channel. You can, of course, send your own replays to me, upload them to whatreplays.com. Copy the URL, whack it into Discord, link in the video description, and I shall take a look. You can also support me on Patreon if you want. Once again, link in the description. And, as ever, I wish you all very happy hunting on that battlefield. Ciao, ciao.